Peter Burke, thank you very much for joining me today and welcome to the channel. Let's
Yeah.
start by getting to know you better. Tell me your story and your background.
When I was in the military, I did a lot of things as an army musician and like that. When I got out, I was like, well, I want to continue that because, that's pretty much what I knew. And I didn't think about other aspects of music other than the performing and the composing at first. And so that's where my main interests were. And Cameron University was right up the street. And literally, I could walk to class, do my thing, and walk back. Um, I loved composing and I loved performing. And while I was there, I was exposed to a couple other aspects of music, such as teaching music, which I would never thought I could do. But I realized that there may be more openings for teaching than for, say, performing, at least in that market. And so I kind of broadened my horizons there to include composition and music education. And basically, it came down to okay, how am I going to feed my family? Because partial way through my academic career, I got married. And so my focus kind of shifted because I was like, okay, I need to feed a family. Education is an easy route and there's jobs there. So I kind of went that route thinking about family support and providing more so than exactly what was exactly in my heart because I really would rather have been on stage more often or the music therapy route, I think, was later on in my master's program. I think that's where I would have made a little bit further shift. But I really miss being on stage as a performer or as a conductor, and I love composing. So that's kind of how it happened.
Fair enough. You performed alongside some interesting known people. Tell me about this a little bit.
Some of it was with the Army Band, doing different gigs where other performers were. Then we would be able to interact with them and oh, hey, we're jamming all of a sudden at outside a stadium, just playing, practicing or something for, before the anthems or something, or before a halftime show or before a parade. Those were just chants. And then, oh, you're going downtown. You still happen to have your axe with you. They're downtown, so happen to have an axe with you. My goodness, the next thing you know, you're in this little hole in the wall and you're jamming. Sometimes things happen like that. Others were encounters that were planned. You know, different artists were invited to come to different institutions, or I was either a student or where I worked, and we just had the perchance of being able to perform with them, and it was some really fun times. Mostly at Cameron University had a jazz festival, and they would bring in some players there. Country jazz fusion is what they called it, and there were a lot of opportunities there.
Okay. And do you think we can go a little bit back in time and you can tell me more about your
Sure.
childhood or teenage years? How was it for you growing up like?
I had a lot of aunts and uncles in my extended family for my mentors and like that. And then throughout my high school years, uh, my dad came more into my life because he retired and he was around an awful lot more. And I was a military brat. So I grew up on some military bases and we went to school in military schools. And then I guess I was in elementary school. We transferred to the Stonington school system. And I went to school in public school, which was real interesting because I had my own classes. I was a class of one academically. Size wise, I was, with the third graders. Academic wise, I was taking classes with fifth and sixth graders. And by the time I got into the fifth and sixth grade, they were bringing down books from the middle. They call it middle school now, but back then it used to be junior high. So I've always been around people that were older than me. Um, it didn't really matter what kind of color you were. We were all workers. Everybody was you, whether you were an officer or an NCO or enlisted, you all worked, you all performed, you did your function, you did your job, and I never knew any different when I translated that elsewhere. Um, I didn't really know much about a lot of the discrimination because at the time I was a kid growing up in the '60s and stuff, but I was a Navy brat, so there were people of all ethnicities on the boat. I knew all sorts of kids growing up in the Navy housing and like that. And then when I transferred over to the civilian school system, I was like, okay, it's just like over there, except for it was different. That I took me a long time to really learn and understand why it was different. And it was interesting to transition to a civilian school system from base housing and the base schools. And so that was kind of an awakening for me. It was very different because I was culturally aware of a lot of things, especially through my dad. Ethnic, you know, ethnic foods were nothing. We ate stuff from everywhere. We watched stuff from everywhere, listened from stuff from everywhere. So I considered myself relatively rounded culturally as far as, being exposed to things around the world. Ideologies, yes. Religions, yes. Cultural activities, yes. Dancing, art, literature, and like that. So, for me, I loved learning things and exposing to new things. Dad would come home from someplace new. First thing I'd do is say, okay, what you got? He showed his pictures and like that. And whenever he was out to sea and like that, I would borrow some of his books and read them. I didn't know what all the words meant and what all the diagrams were for, but I was in fifth or sixth grade and I had a science project on a nuclear reactor. So I had fun. I had fun learning. I think my dad was probably one of the bigger influences on me as far as academia, because I don't think I ever saw him not reading, not watching, or not learning in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And, I think he's probably my biggest influence as far as my pursuit academia.
Um, would you say your childhood times or your times being a child or teenager were better in general compared to the times today, how children and teenagers experience? And if yes, why?
Oh, wow. I think it was better because I experienced it with my parents, my dad, through my dad when he was away and he would send things, and with, the other adult role models. I had to go looking for it. It was not as easily accessible as it is nowadays. I mean, today you can go YouTube, you look up a video, blah, blah, blah. Cool. All right. So where's the exhilaration? Where's the sensation where's the tactile? You know what I'm saying? Part of the knowledge is there intellectually, cognitively, but the connection is not always there because you're not really experiencing it. You're living it through a video of somebody else. So it's different. Um, Accessibility to much more now, especially with the internet and all that. But quality, I think, was probably better back then. Whoops, here go my cats. Back then, because you had to go do it, you had to go look for it, you had to have some participation in the experience more so than now. Now, don't get me wrong. Nowadays, people go out and they look for those things and everything like that, and it's wonderful. And that's who's posting those videos that everybody's going, "Whoa!" You know what I'm saying? So you can share experiences a lot more frequently, but not quite as effective because you're not going to get the acceleration of repelling 100 feet and the ground's coming up at you and you're going ah because you're face first going down a rope 3.5 feet from a cliff. Fun.
Was there ever a moment in life where you wish you could go back in time and do it differently? Or are you quite, or were you quite happy with how things progressed in your life?
Yes. Okay. One is something I would tell advice to a lot of the young people nowadays. Don't listen to the haters. I unfortunately did, and so I did not take advantage of a wonderful opportunity that I really wish I had taken advantage of. Um, I got some recruitment letters for Delta Force, and I was like, cool. And so I, asked a couple people about it, and hearing nothing but ridicule and blah blah blah, laughing and reasons why, I never pursued it. I did hear one comment that said, I'm paraphrasing, it was kind of like, cool. I'm not sure they take you with glasses, but cool. And that was, and so I listened to the haters. So don't listen to the haters, go for it. If you don't achieve something, let it be because you didn't try and they had qualifications or they had things that you didn't quite have or they were looking for something or let it be because you tried and didn't quite make it. Don't let it be because you didn't. That's one thing. If I can go back, I would. Something else I would tell my younger self. um, the first time that your first wife cheats on you, get the divorce. Don't drag it out for 6, 7 years, because that affected me, my military career, my relationship with my family, my relationship with my son, and um, yeah, I would go back and do that again so that I didn't experience some of the things that I did and put myself through some of the bad times and cause some of the rift between families, because during that time I lost touch with a lot of my family, and didn't have the best of relationship with my son when he was growing up and like that. So um, I missed having a good relationship with my son, and I think going back and doing that instead of dragging things and trying to make things and all that stuff, I think that would have been better for all of us, pretty much, really.
What would you say is the one piece of advice you received in your life that stuck with you and you've applied it throughout your life?
Something that stuck with me. hmm. All right, do it right the first time. Do your job. I said it backwards. Do your job. Do it right the first time. Because I found that to be quite true. When you don't do your job and you don't do it right, you got to go back and do it again and again. And if you're lazy, thinking, well, I'm gonna, halfway do this and then they won't ask me to do it again. Well, no, 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 no. You're gonna get asked to do it again and again. So I've always found that do your job, doing it right the first time is the best advice I've ever found, because it's so true. And it doesn't matter whether you're working in school, whether you're cooking in the kitchen, whether you're doing yard work, it doesn't matter. It applies to just about everything, everywhere. And yes, my dad told me that. And then later on, I heard it from Bill Belichick. So,
That note, what would you say? How did you cope with difficult times in life? You mentioned some scenarios that you would do things differently. Potentially, it could be difficult at that period of time. How did you deal with those situations? And what advice would you give to younger people how to deal with difficult situations?
okay. Advice for people how to deal with really situations like that. Well, if you try not to lose your cool and try to stay calm and remember that, okay, I'm here, this is this, I will get out of this, then that will probably be the best thing that you can do. Because when you're stressed, it's a lot of times like the fight or flight will kick in, which is perfectly fine. Just know when you need to fight and when not to. All right, don't go picking battles that you're not gonna win. For example, my truck blew up one time. I got my stuff, got out of it, realized that there was something in there that I thought I needed. Actually, it was the insurance paperwork, registration, and all that legal stuff. So I grabbed my horn, threw it on my back, walked back to the truck, got in this burning vehicle, got all the legal stuff that I thought I needed that, honestly, I really didn't because I had copies of it elsewhere, I guess. I'm not really sure, but I'm sure it could have been looked up. And then walked away with everything that I needed, like it was nothing. Of course, I got looked at like I was crazy, and I probably was crazy for doing such a thing because, I knew the dangers. It could go poof at any time. But there was also some stuff in there that was kind of personal in nature, a couple of pictures and like that I also had tucked in that little envelope where you keep your insurance card, your this card, your that card. And it was a picture of my son, and I was like, that was okay. I needed that. I got that. And so I was like, I kept my cool. I didn't freak out about losing something that was dear to me. And I got that picture. Well, it's on a Rolodex over there on my desk, but I still have that picture. And so, for me, that was a tense situation. There's an emotional attachment to it. That's why I remember it. And I remember people thinking I was absolutely crazy because I was driving by Catlett Hall. And I talk about this in my book. I was driving by Catlett Hall, my truck on the tow truck there, and I looked out and I saw one of his fellow students and said, "Hey, tell Dr. R that I'm going to be late for class." And they just went, as I drove away. So for me, the truck blowing up, that was a little bit of a tense situation. I was a civilian. I was in grad school. This was like, I guess, a week before exams or something. Not exactly sure, but I remember exams being close, and I remember thinking, I really don't know how I'm going to get to and from school now with exams close by. So, for me, that was a semi-academically tense situation. There are other tense situations are probably things like when you're sitting on the highway, you miss your exit, and the next exit's for like 150 miles because it's like maybe I-10. There's not many exits through the desert. Just keep your cool. Know where you are, know what you have, and try to remember previous training or previous YouTube videos or previous experiences from people that help keep your head on, and you'll get through it. You know, at the very worst, grab somebody and go, "Hey, what?" You know what I mean? Someone's grab somebody. Don't go through anything alone. Don't go through anything alone. It sucks. Just grab somebody. Don't go through anything alone.
Okay. You briefly mentioned about your book. Tell me a little bit more about it.
Well, I talk about my experiences in higher education. It's basically my academic journey. It's on Amazon. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. But it's got green cover. It's got pictures of me in a couple of my military settings, a couple of different uniforms. One of them's in a couple academic settings with instruments and like that. And I talk about what made me get my life together and get back to school. Because while I was in, I would take a couple courses here and there, depending deployments and things like that. Excuse me. And so I didn't really have a degree. Well, there was an incident involving my roommate, and I thought he was getting mugged, and I was going to go help him, and I was encouraged not to. Click, click. And so at that moment, I decided that I need to get my life together and go back to school. And so I discuss what it was like for a veteran to be in school as an undergrad, where I was pretty much as old or older than my instructors. I was definitely older than 90% of my fellow students. I was like, okay, so this is cool. You know, and then when I went to grad school, it was pretty much the same thing. I went to the University of Oklahoma, and there I was like, um, my teachers are my age and everything else like that, and some, oh, you've been to Vietnam, yeah, okay, we're talking about Vietnam. He was, yeah, oh, that presentation, my history teacher down in Cameron University used that was you on that film, yeah, oh, okay. It's interesting because I talked to a couple of Vietnam vets, you know even back when I was an undergrad at Cameron University. One of them was in my history class, and they were covering the Tet Offensive, and he got up and left, and the instructor asked why. He says, I'm in the video, and his unit was, and so he left. And that kind of touched me. I didn't put that incident in the book or anything like that, but um, I was realizing then that, boy, I said, I wonder how many veterans are actually out here. And so throughout my academic journey, I realized that there's more veterans when I went to when I was a graduate student at the University of Oklahoma. Well, they had a more active ROTC program. And so their student veteran population was slightly higher than what it was at Cameron University. But then there's also a gap between the late 90s and early 2000 and then 2010, 2011. And then later on, when I was going through my doctorate, I was noticing there's a lot of veterans out here, and the student veteran population was going up. So I talk about different incidents in my life, how different aspects of having PTSD affect my academic performance, and how both of those merge together to kind of guide where and how my academic career went. I did my dissertation on it's big, it's thick, it took forever, but it's perceptions of student veterans with PTSD and the available support services for PTSD that's available up in, you know, the academic world. And it's a qualitative descriptive analysis, all of its veterans' works, what they find, what they don't find, and what they needed. And then later on, after I graduated, I did a little study which is in the Journal of Veteran Studies, discovering the listed PTSD support on academic campuses. And the one from my traditional institution was published. Basically, it was a web survey of their home pages. And then I had some search terms that I typed in the search box, and search terms that I looked on for different categories when I scoped out the pages and like that. Basically, it was things like PTSD support, and things like that. And then how much support was accessible, like, VA. They had educational support, but how many of it had for their medical benefits and like that. So that article, which was published last year, delves into that aspect of veterans, veteran support. Um, I talk about the findings and results of that, in the book, and I encourage you to look at the Journal of Veteran Studies. They have a lot of very interesting articles, and they produce a newsletter that comes out listing some of the articles and like that, every month and every quarter and like that. So it's a really good read if you're an educator, if you're a veteran, which is Hi. And so I talk about the types of support that there is overall, how things affect your academic performance, how being employed or unemployed, affected my academic support, my academic performance, who supported me, how did they support me, motivation, things like that. Um, it was kind of difficult for some because I became a single parent in a very strange way. And then later on, um, I lived in the same state, pretty much in the same town with my son. So we kind of, got our relationship, more or less back on track. Of course, we're adults and it's 20 years later, which is a good thing. But relationships are a large part of academic performance. Relationships are a large part of PTSD support. And so my book is just is just overall of stuff that's what it's like to be a student veteran. My other two books that are in the works, one is on familial and fraternal support, and the other book will be on musical support as far as music therapy. Excuse me, what veterans listen to address the different effects of PTSD. I'm currently in a data collection phase for. I got a survey going out. I want to find out what veterans listen to. It's going to be part of an article that I'm writing for publication. And so my book on music therapy and musical support is probably going to be going out way later because I have a lot of music to talk about in there. And, that's taken me a bit more time than I anticipated. And I'm writing the book on familial support and fraternal support, kind of hand in hand. And that they're both progressing nicely. However, the music one is going to take so much longer because there is so much as far as music, that I'm discussing on there, that I think I will probably end up going with the fraternal and familial support. I've also talked to some different people, veterans and non-veterans and like that, and a couple of them are like, one person said, I'm glad you're writing these books, and I can't wait. And that's why I'm thinking the one on the familial and fraternal will be done first, so that they can read that prior to the music one. Because I think what I want to do with the music one is make sure that I have all lyrics correct, the copyright stuff is correct, my analysis correct, and that'll happen when I have a friend of mine. He doesn't know it yet, but a friend of mine's a wonderful composer. His name is Clint Williams. Look him up. He was an undergrad at Cameron University. A phenomenal gentleman, phenomenal composer, great voice. Clint Williams. I'm going to ask him to look over, my music analysis and like that. So, depending on my Shakirian analysis. As of right now, there's going to be a detailed analysis. I may end up having to, due to the length of the paper, I may have to cut some of that out. But as of right now, I'd love to find out why different songs work the way they do. The different song structures, the different cadences. You know, there's already publications that say what type of music, happy music promotes this, and these keys are promoting this type of emotion or this, that, and the other thing. There's already studies out there, and there's already historical books, and you look at, some things on romantic era and their music and Beethoven and some others and like that, and there's all that out there. But I want to see what's going on, what veterans are listening to, and then I want to see if I can delve into the music aspect of it a little bit more deeper. And so it may be ending up being an actual two-part study. One where I publish what's out there and what works, and then a second one where I get some little help with there from another musicologist and say, hey, is this correct? Am I doing this right? See if you can check my stuff for me and see if there's some type of formula for music that works for this or that. Who knows? Because different aspects of music do invoke different responses Now, when are there common responses and for different aspects of PTSD? I don't know yet. So, I'm thinking about that. Maybe I may talk with Clint and see what he thinks, but haven't quite decided yet. That's gonna be a little bit down the road there on the further development. As of right now, I've already had to cut length because of material, just so that I can allow for the findings and like that. So I don't know. We'll have to see how that one goes. But I love music, and as I said, I love being on stage as a performer and as a conductor, and um, I can't really read the music anymore because my eyesight's really bad. It's I can need the big note versions, thank you much. But I've always been real interested in music therapy. And as I said, I probably should have gone music therapy instead of music education, because I love musication. Don't get me wrong, but in the back of that music therapy has always been there because it's always been a part of my life, but I didn't put it up to the front because I've always used music to help me out through different aspects of my life. When things got rough, I would listen to different things. If I needed motivation, I would listen to different things, and you know, subconsciously, music therapies has been there. And at the time when I needed to make that decision, I was hearing things like, well, there's not really a market for it. There's not really um, a need for it. There's more need for music educators. And so that's, it kind of pushed me more toward the music ed. Plus, a friend of mine gave me the teaching book, would tell me stories about, some things with their students and like that. And one little phrase one kid would say, can't remember. And I always just thought that was adorable. And they always had stories with their students like that. And so that kind of gave me the teaching bug. And so that is what actually leaned me more towards music education than toward the music therapy. But, you know, I wonder if I put that in my book or not. I'm not sure. But,
Great. All right. Final word of wisdom that you would want to pass to the younger generation. What would they be?
oh, words of wisdom, huh? Okay. That I did write one little note down. Don't rush. It's not just about you, it's also about the future. Okay. I wrote that down because I anticipated that one. So this is what I mean. I rushed through some of the things because of what I thought at the time would have been the best, and actually it wasn't. I didn't think things through all the time for myself. I didn't do my own research. I listened to people that weren't looking out for me or my best interest. So take your time. When you have a life decision, don't do it when you're overly emotional because that that warps the perception of things. Okay, if there are people that have your best interest out, they will give you an unbiased opinion, whether it hurts or not. Deal with it. Take it for what it is, and try to remember that what you do now is going to come back later on. Okay, so if you go and get this job because, well, I need to provide, get that job to provide. But if you have a passion for something else somewhere else, try to get it. Whether you have to go to school part time to make the qualifications, do it. Still work at that job to provide, but don't give up and don't lose out on your passion, your hopes, and your dreams, because eventually you will go slow and you will reach that and you will go, okay, I don't need to do this to provide anymore. I can do this and not worrying about providing and enjoy doing this because I took my time. I did my research. It wasn't just about me. It was just about me here, which is now the future. So that's, oh, and do your job, Bill Belichick.
That's a really good piece of advice. Peter, I really
Well,
wanted
I don't
to
know.
thank you for your
I
time, sharing
try.
your knowledge, stories, and experiences.
This was very interesting. I'm used to being on radio. I used to had a student worker job at KCCU, and I used to do music production and some on-air stuff and like that. And we'd go out and do public appearances. And I was told, yeah, I have the face and the voice for radio. So this is kind of like radio, modern day radio, because now you can see people, which is kind of cool, with this podcast. So I wish you all the good luck with this and your endeavors in this. And I'm going to shoot you an email because I'm going to want some information so that I can help promote your podcast. Overall, your channel there is on YouTube, I believe. So I had a great time, and I'm looking forward to seeing the final product. And yeah, I'll do it again, sure.